So in this chapter, we'll be discussing about World Trade Organization. So this is might be a lengthy chapter, but please bear with me. This is an important topic. So before World Trade Organization, there used to be a forum called GATT. Okay, GATT stands for General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So this was a legal agreement between many countries. The overall purpose was to promote international trade. Okay, by reducing or eliminating trade barriers such as tariffs and quotas. So we discussed about these tariffs in an earlier chapter. Why countries impose these tariffs? These are trade barriers. Okay, barrier in the sense we are not allowing free movement of goods, and this is to protect the local industries. So GATT, the agreement is we have to bring down or reduce or totally eliminate these trade barriers to allow free movement of goods. Okay, so then GATT was modified over decades, and finally WTO was created by 123 countries in 95. Okay, and WTO is the only international organization that deals with global rules of trade between nations. So you have to understand that WTO is a very sensitive topic, and you should understand the reason why this is sensitive. Of course, one reason we said that allowing free movement of goods will hamper the local industry. That is one point, but there are areas in which, from the point of view of our country, there are areas in which we are competitive. Say, for example, in areas of, like, say, textiles, garments, we are competitive. Okay, there are areas where we are not competitive. Okay, so now if we follow free trade, it will be free trade for all goods. If we can't be selective. Okay, so a developing country like India will be at a disadvantage if we allow free trade of all goods. There might be areas which will benefit us, but there will definitely be areas where we will be affected. And because also India is a country where we have a lot of poor people, and 70% of the country is dependent on agriculture. So we can't have a situation where, say, for example, we are allowing free trade, and food grains are allowing, say, someone manufacturing a lot of food grains in US are exporting to India, and because there is no restrictions, all the food grains are coming to India. And just imagine if that price is lower than the price which is available in the country, and we start buying those because competitive. What happens to all the farmers? Because it's a country where 70% of the population is dependent on agriculture. What happens to them? So we have to think of all these issues. Okay, it's not just a free trade. For a developing country like India, there are a lot of issues at stake. So let us see what are these issues here. So WTO agreements. This is the first point you have to remember. WTO frames agreements. So this is the heart of the system. The system is known as the multilateral trading system. So WTO's agreements are negotiated and signed by a large majority of the world's trading nations and ratified in their parliaments. So when a member country signs a WTO agreement, what basically it says is the country is agreeing to observe certain constraints while making future trade policies. Okay, so right at the level of parliament, we're doing this. Okay, so say, for example, India is a part of WTO. So WTO has, say, for example, framed one agreement, and all the member countries have framed that agreement. India being a signatory of the WTO, it is bound by WTO, that particular agreement, if we sign it. Okay, then in our country, whenever we frame in parliaments, we frame various acts. Okay, once we sign that WTO agreement, we are agreeing to observe those certain constraints while making future trade policies. Okay, so we are bound to follow that agreement, and that's why certain agreements are controversial. Okay, so WTO also provides a platform that allows the member governments to sort out any trade problems they face with other members. So let us see what are the principles of WTO. One is non-discrimination. Non-discrimination means treating other nations equally. So under WTO agreements, countries cannot normally they cannot discriminate between the trading partners. So if they grant some country a special favor, say, for example, a lower customs duty for one of the products, then they have to do the same for all other WTO members. This is non-discrimination. Okay, some exceptions are allowed, like, for example, we discussed about trade blocks. So countries can set up a free trade agreement that applies to only goods traded within the group. That is allowed, but this is the core principle of WTO. This is non-discrimination. Another core principle is free trade. So lowering trade barriers such as custom duties and measures such as imports, bans, and quotas. Okay, then predictability. So the WTO system is an attempt by governments to make the business environment stable and predictable. And then there is market access. Market access requires that tariffs fixed by individual countries be cut progressively to allow free trade. So it requires countries to remove non-tariff barriers and convert them to tariff duties. Earlier, there used to be something called quotas for imports, under which only certain quantities of particular commodities were allowed to import. This is an example of a non-tariff barrier. Tariff barrier versus non-tariff barrier. What is the difference? Tariff barrier means, say for example, we're imposing, say, customs duty at the time of import. Thereby, the price is increasing. Non-tariff barriers means it's not related to the price, but say for example, quota. Okay, quota, like we are restricting what is the quantity of a particular commodity that can be imported. So all this have to, market access means the countries are required to remove these non-tariff barriers also. There is also stipulation of maximum tariff that should never be surpassed. And since India is a member of WTO, India has substantially reduced tariffs. Only goods which are exempted by the agreement are kept under control. So what are the advantages of free trade? Stimulation of free trade, and decline in trade disputes. What are the disadvantages? So domestic interests will be affected, and also there will be increase in foreign influence in a way. And as I said earlier, it's a sensitive issue. Free trade among nations without tariffs and without quotas is a very highly sensitive issue. And if total restrictions are removed, it might result in adverse impact on the domestic industries. For example, Chinese products, as you know, are cheaper than Indian products. And if we don't impose any tariffs or quota, then these Chinese products will flood the Indian market, starting from toys and everything. Almost every product they manufacture. If we don't have these tariffs, that will be resulting in the closure of many Indian companies, especially small companies which cannot withstand competition. Okay, and also this will be exposing the country to the volatile international market. The incomes of the poor people will be affected. So that is why free trade and WTO are sensitive issues. So developing countries like India have a lot of reservations here. So WTO agreements usually allow developing countries some preferential treatment, just for this very reason. Okay, because the people may suffer if total free trade is allowed. So WTO agreements usually allow developing countries like India some preferential treatment. So they allow extra time to fulfill the obligations. So WTO agreements have provisions requiring WTO members to safeguard the interests of developing countries when adopting some domestic or international measures like anti-dumping, safeguard, technical barriers to trade. So WTO agreements will have provisions designed to increase developing countries' trading opportunities through greater market access. And WTO has a special safeguard mechanism that allows developing countries to impose additional safeguard duties in the event of abnormal surge in imports. That is a special safeguard. So in case there is an abnormal increase in imports or entry of cheap imports, then it allows the developing countries to impose additional safeguard duties. Okay. So in bank interviews, the two most commonly asked questions on WTO are MFA and subsidies. Okay. MFA stands for multi-fiber agreement. So developing countries like say India and Bangladesh have advantage in textile production because textiles is a garment manufacturing is a labor intensive process. And because developing countries like India and Bangladesh have lower labor costs, we are at a competitive advantage. So if you go to places like Tirupur in Tamil Nadu, I mean it's a small town, but you'll be stunned by the amount of exports they're doing. Most of the exports are garments. Okay, and you'll be amazed at in such a small place, is it really so much thousands of crores of exports going on? Okay, similarly in Bangladesh. So we have advantage India and Bangladesh because that labor intensive process of garment manufacturing, and because labor is cheap here compared to developed countries, we have advantage. So MFA was introduced as a short-term measure intended to allow developed countries to adjust to imports from the developing countries. So otherwise, the developed countries will be at a disadvantage because the garments which are manufactured in their countries will be more expensive. So to allow developed countries to adjust to imports from the developing world, MFA was introduced. So the agreement on textiles and clothing provided for the gradual dismantling of quotas that existed under MFA. So under MFA there used to be these quotas. So now the agreement on textiles and clothing provided for the gradual dismantling of these quotas also. But however, large tariffs remain in place on many textile products. Then there is a very sensitive issue of subsidies. Okay. So TFA stands for Trade Facilitation Agreement. So the aim of TFA is to cut down bureaucracy which slows down the movement of goods across borders, and it aims to simplify and modernize export and import process. The problem in TFA is that one of the clauses says farm subsidies cannot be more than 10% of the value of agricultural production. This is one of the critical points which is concerning India. Okay, so what is it? What does the clause say? Farm subsidies cannot be more than 10% of the value of the agricultural production. So as you know, the government offers a lot of subsidies to the farming sector. The reason why WTO wants subsidies to be cut. So if you provide subsidies, what are subsidies? Subsidies, you must have known this. For example, government gives subsidies on fertilizers or seeds. So for the farmer to start the farming activity, he needs, what are the inputs he needs? To say seeds, he needs fertilizers, equipment, machinery equipment, maybe tractors and other tools. Okay, and also at the time of selling, at the time of sale also, government will be providing support to something called as minimum support price, MSP. Okay, so all these are subsidies because this is not the market rate. We are providing subsidy, allowing them to access all these facilities at the lower rate. So in a way, we are making them more competitive, because if these were not given, the price of production will be more and the sale price will be more. Okay, but because of the subsidies, they are becoming more competitive. That subsidy is borne by the government. Okay, so this prices, the product price is less. Now now they're competing at the international level. This is a problem for the other countries. Okay, so what the reason why WTO wants subsidies to be cut are providing subsidies like subsidy on inputs of agriculture will make exports cheaper. Okay, because now farmers can get all this, get the production at a cheaper rate, and when they export it to other countries, the price will be cheaper. This can result in dumping of cheaper products in other countries. So that will be affecting the agriculture sector of the other countries. Say we are to US, we are exporting all these food grains. So the Indian farmer, because he got a lot of subsidies, he is able to sell at a lower price compared to other countries. Okay. Then the foreign companies cannot do profitable business because they'll then have to sell it less than the subsidy. Else no one will buy it from them. In a free market, if in the US, if they're able to import the Indian food grains at a lower price than the local US companies just selling it at higher price, nobody will buy it from them. Okay. Also, because India offers MSP, that is the minimum support price to farmers. This we discussed in earlier chapter, MSP. Please refer back to that section. So farmers are interested in producing more and more food grains because government will give them the assured minimum price. So this will result in increase in buffer stocks. And due to this, India will dump its excess stock in international markets, which is a loss to foreign companies. Dumping means where the manufacturers export a product to another country at a price below the normal price. And the objective is to increase the market share in a foreign market by driving out competition. So it creates a sort of a monopoly-like situation where the exporter will unilaterally dictate the price of the market. All this is not encouraged by a WTO. So this is a sensitive issue, cutting down subsidies, because for a country like India gives a lot of subsidies, food grains, kerosene, fertilizers, and if subsidies are reduced, it will affect the food security of millions of people. In fact, it's only by subsidies that the vulnerable part of the population, okay, those who are living below the poverty line or slightly above the poverty line, it's only because of the subsidies they are able to access the food grains at very cheap rates to ration shops. That is, the formal name is PDS, Public Distribution System. Because if you cut down the subsidies, it will affect a very large portion of the population. And also, government buys food grains from farmers at MSP, which is also a form of subsidy. So, as I said earlier, that WTO, the clause in TFA says that farm subsidies cannot be more than 10% of the value of agricultural production. So WTO wants to put a cap on the subsidy. So if the total production cost is say 100 rupees, say for example, theoretically, just for example, one bag of rice, food grains, wheat, one bag costs 100 rupees to produce that. What WTO says is, out of this 100, only 10 rupees should be going to a subsidy. Subsidy should not cross 10% of the value of the agricultural production. That is not possible. Okay. And also this 10% cap was calculated based on 86-88 prices. At which time prices of food grains were lower. So India wants the cap to be updated considering the latest prices. Another objection of India is that while TFA insists on developing countries to cut their farm subsidies, developed countries like US still provide subsidies to farmers to extent of more than $20 billion per year. So US provides what is known as Export Credit Guarantee Program, by which US government gives subsidized credit to purchasers of US agricultural products, which are to be paid back in long periods. So this results in perpetual dependence on foreign grain recipient countries. So that is destroying the domestic agriculture. So this is equally a trade distorting subsidy. It's not a direct subsidy, but it's a form of subsidy. Okay, so these are some of the issues that India is raising. You can read more about India's stand at WTO. There are some articles which have provided links here. But really, this is an advanced topic. You need not get into more depth for your interviews, because the issues which India and developing countries are raising, they can be quite complex. You need not get into that much depth. The questions need to be made in this chapter: what is full form of GATT? What was its purpose? Now GATT is not there. Okay, that was transformed to WTO. So what is WTO? What are WTO agreements? What are some principles of WTO? What are the advantages and disadvantages of free trade? Why is free trade a sensitive issue for countries like India? Why was multi-fiber arrangement introduced? This is in the area of textiles. What is the aim of trade facilitation agreement? We discuss this. Why does WTO want subsidies to be cut? What is meant by dumping? We discuss this. And what are India's objections to trade facilitation agreement? So if you can say 2 points, what are the objections of India to the trade facilitation agreement, that will be sufficient. One issue is that the 10% cap was calculated based on 86-88 prices, that needs to be updated. Another point is the developed countries are providing export credit guarantee programs. Okay, so that is also a trade distorting subsidy. So they want developing countries like us to cut down farm subsidies, whereas developed countries are continuing to provide a different form of subsidy. Okay, so if you can answer those questions, that will be sufficient.